All right, welcome everybody to the 2025 student engagement session with industry experts. So we are very happy to see you here. So we want this session to be very interactive with our speakers who will talk about their job, their activities, their backgrounds. Before starting the session, I would like to give the word to Hongyue Sun, who is the president of the section of quality, statistics, and reliability, to give us some welcoming words. So Hongyue, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Hi everyone, and apologize. I have another conflict, and I will just speak some words and then step away for another meeting. And good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of the Informs QSR, which is a quality, statistics, and reliability section, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this excellent QSR student engagement session with industrial experts. And I want to appreciate all the panelists, Dr. Gabriel, Ryan, and Eric, to have the time to give this interaction with the students at QSR. And I also want to appreciate the efforts from Peter and Alan to organize this session. And as Alan mentioned, this session is designed to foster meaningful and informal conversations between the students. And please go ahead with any questions you may have, and also ask any questions related to the industry, to the career development. And I gladly to have this panelist, and each of the panelists brings a unique perspective on applying the data science, analytics, and quality tools in the real world. And so one last item, as Alan shared with the link for the registration, is that now QSR is discussing a possibility to waive the QSR membership fee for those students who have the Informs membership. And please fill in the form and stay tuned. And yeah, I think that's all from my side. And thank you, Alan and Peter.
Thank you, Hongyue. So that today we have three speakers. So Eric Bediako from Chevron, we have Gabriel Ruiz from Adobe, and Ryan Lekivetz from JMP. So my name is Alan Vasquez from Tecnológico de Monterrey, and together with Jia Liu from the Auburn University, we organize this session. So we are going to start by giving 15 minutes, maximum 15 minutes to each of our speakers to describe their jobs. Then after we finish with everyone, then we will give room for questions from the audience. So we can start with Ryan Lekivetz. So please, Ryan, give us your perspective on industry, please.
Let me unmute myself then. All right. And thank you for the chance to actually talk to you here today. Something I really do enjoy talking about working at JMP. In particular, because a lot of people may not have even heard of JMP. And I feel like for a lot of people, if you're studying in the QSR fields, you really haven't thought about necessarily working in software development. Okay, and so just a little bit of an outline. So I'm going to give you an idea about myself, then just really introduce what is JMP, and talk about kind of the roles and jobs at JMP. So about me. So my background, so I actually have a BSc in computer science and math from University of Regina, which is actually in Canada, a province called Saskatchewan. So then I went and did my master's and Ph.D. at Simon Fraser University, so in Vancouver. And so in particular, my background, my Ph.D. in statistics was a focus on design of experiments. Right, and so it's going to turn out that's going to play a role in what I do now. So then I was an assistant professor for 1 year at University of British Columbia in the Okanagan. But that was, admittedly, it was a term position, a 3-year term, and not tenure track. So I enjoyed being a professor. But in 2012, the opportunity came to move to JMP. And so I started there as a research statistician developer, which I'll describe a little bit shortly. But then so I've actually been at JMP ever since. All right, so since 2012, I've been at JMP. And so currently, my title is Advanced Analytics Director. And so in particular, I really manage the design of experiments and reliability group at JMP. Right, so if you've ever used JMP, anything that falls under the design of experiments menu, I kind of manage that team. And likewise, we have our reliability team as well that works under those tools. Okay, so usually if I give this talk in person, I get a show of hands to how many people have even heard of JMP. So if you haven't heard of JMP, you've probably heard of SAS, right? Statistical software. So JMP was actually created in 1989 out of SAS, right? And so, and JMP, depending on who you talk to, stands for John's Macintosh Project, and the John there being John Saul, who's one of the co-founders of SAS and still owns about 1/3 of SAS today. And so the whole idea with JMP is that it empowers scientists and engineers to explore data visually on their desktops, right? And so particular notice that scientists and engineers, so not being designed for statisticians per se, but for scientists and engineers. Now I'll also say we have a very passionate user base. So in particular, those users who've ingrained JMP as part of their everyday lives, once you get to a certain point of using JMP, it becomes so sticky that it's hard to imagine going back to anything else, especially for that idea of data exploration and playing around with your data. Now, one thing at JMP, which is maybe even a little bit unlike SAS, it's a very flat management structure. So John Saul is actually still active in R&D. So he's actually the head of R&D. I report right to John Saul. He gets to know a lot of our development staff. When we have interns, he'll actually stop by and talk to them about the research, introduce himself. And I think there's often pictures of John Saul having lunch with the interns during the summer and stuff like that. Okay, so QSR roles at JMP and SAS. So I'll say for a lot of the people that I work with, myself included, when we were getting our degrees, it wasn't on our radar that we might end up at a software development company. But so the typical roles that you may see, you'll see titles like this. So research statistician, developers, testers, systems engineers, technical support statisticians, consultants, data scientists. And I'll say particularly though in the R&D side, that's where you'll see more of that research statistician, developer, and tester. And so systems engineer, I'll talk about shortly. So I think those are really going to be the three main ones that I'll highlight: this research statistician, developer, research statistician, tester, and systems engineer. So it turns out system engineer is actually like a sales role, right? And so in that description, they say they provide technical assistance for software pre-sale, post-sale activities, utilizing knowledge of industry or industry segment processes and challenges. So, okay, that's a lot of words, but really the idea of a systems engineer is that they actually work with customers and they try to show customers how JMP can solve their problems, perhaps a lot easier than what they're doing now. Now, where we see a lot of our systems engineers come in is they maybe have non-statistical or non-QSR graduate degrees typically, right? So they'll have a master's or a PhD in something like chemistry, biology, some form of engineering. And so they can really speak to that industry-specific knowledge and use that to have JMP help our users or help our customers solve their problems. And so that's where in particular, I'd say the system engineering jobs are really great. While it's in sales, I feel like they still get to have a lot of fun. They get to work on interesting problems and help with things that. And so especially, if you're coming from a different background, I think when you see systems engineer, you probably see that job title and what does that really mean? So this is where I would recommend looking into something like that. Okay, so I said, sometimes when I started in 2012, I came in as a research statistician developer. So what's a research statistician developer? Well, sometimes we actually just develop and maintain statistical software, right? So whether that be SAS or something like JMP, And so when you see somebody with this title, this research statistician developer that shows up, so it's really the responsibility of developing these statistical platforms in JMP. Now under the covers, so this is where you actually need to know some C++, but many of our research statistician developers started without any knowledge of C++. You kind of pick it up on the job as you go. And often, so we'll prototype in JSL, so which is the JMP scripting language, which again, so if it's actually most similar to SAS's IML. But again, so if you're already used to working with R, you can kind of get up to speed quickly in something like JSL. And so there's actually multiple development groups. So like I had mentioned, the team that I manage is everything that falls under that DOE menu or reliability. But we also have an analysis group and a life science group that are just kind of focused on the statistics. So I think one of the most interesting parts of being a research statistician developer is actually figuring out, well, how do we decide what goes into the product? Right. So especially at the end of the day, we still want to try to sell copies of JMP, right, in order to have a job. And so how do we decide? Well, so often it may be something like customers, right? Interfacing with customers, trying to figure out what the problems they're trying to solve. And maybe missing functionality. There may be other software that can provide some of these things. And I'll admit selfishly, sometimes it's our own research. So a lot of us are still active in the research community. And so that, and I'll say that research kind of drives what goes into the product, but that's often because we're looking for problems that address customer needs and that missing functionality. But so one of the big questions we often have to ask is that, is there a solution and who is it for? So in particular, if a customer comes to you with a problem, if there's no solution in the literature, then we have to come up with creating some type of solution for them. And as well, that who is it for? It's very different if I'm anticipating, let's say a PhD statistician using a particular tool that I'm working on versus a wide range of scientists and engineers. And so I just put a highlight here that this is like our JMP user conferences that now go all over the world. So like this year, I think Austin, Texas in October. I've been to Japan and Korea, and just trying to get a good cross segment of these customers and what types of problems that they're dealing with. One thing I like to talk about a lot, so for those of you, if you've ever seen me at a statistics conference, I often like to talk about the testing challenge, right? So a really fascinating job as a research statistician tester, which is really using analytical methodologies to test and validate statistical algorithms. Because it turns out actually testing statistical software is an extremely difficult task, especially to figure out, is the answer that JMP or whatever software you're using, is it correct? Does it give you the right number? Right. And so it turns out usually if you see this title, this research statistician tester, I say here graduate degrees in a quantitative field. And so I think pretty much all of our recent hires, they're all PhDs in some type of field. Now, one thing I just want to highlight here is that sometimes I think that there's this fear that, let's say if I go into industry, if I leave academia and go into industry, does that mean I can't really publish anymore? And so I'll say, here's just a highlight of some different papers and patents that we've had just within the DOE and reliability group, right? And so in that sense, you'll still actually see us as regulars at, a different subset of different conferences. Like Alan, I've seen you a number of times at different conferences throughout the years. And so just to say that it doesn't mean that your research has to go away. You can still publish, you can still present, things like that. Now, I just want to highlight, so say most of the people that I work with, how do they get their job? Well, a lot of times it actually starts through internships, right? And so if you're looking for internships and jobs at JMP or SAS, so JMP, it's actually just www.jump.com/careers. Now, usually those are posted in October, but I'll actually say just this week, I did see that there was a summer internship in the JMP Life Sciences group. And that's actually working with Russ Wolfinger, who did the original GLIM mixed in SAS. and is actually a Kaggle Grandmaster. And you can see there too, he talks about machine learning. So he does a lot of with XGBoost and Torch, but also in particular to talk about with biochemistry. And just so what do we look for? So say at least in the DOE and reliability group, typically I end up looking for senior PhD students, right? And so I'm looking for a lot of curiosity. Oftentimes we'll do novel research even in an internship. Communication is that, can you talk to customers? Can you actually talk to academics, and can you talk to customers? And adaptability, just in that you never know what you're going to work on from one day to the next. I'll say our best laid plans for what we start with the project always end up changing. And with that, in the interest of time, I want to say thank you for your time, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Ryan. So let's move on to the next speaker. So remember, the interactions and questions are at the end of the session. So let's move to Gabriel Ruiz from Adobe. So Gabriel, you're ready, well, free to go to share screen or just talk to us about your daily job.
Of course, yeah. One second.
Yep.
I'm gonna pop up some slides. Actually, Alan, would it be possible to jump to the next speaker? I have to give Chrome some permission to share the screen.
Yeah, sure. So let's move to, yeah, all right. So let's move then to Eric Bediako. So Dr. Bediako, you can just talk to us about your job activities.
Thank you. Let me share my screen here. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to the student body. Eric Bediako, I'm an asset integrity engineer with Chevron. And I'd just like to reiterate a little bit that Ryan had mentioned that when he did his degree, he did not know he was going to end up in software engineering, right? And it's the same for all of us in this engineering field. So I am a chemical engineer by degree. I am a mechanical engineer by practice, and I've worked in a space of industrial engineering as well, where I got my graduate degree, my master's and PhD in systems and engineering management. So this is to say that, even with your degree, you would notice as you go forth that you are not tied to the discipline that you start with, right? And it's something that you should be open-minded about, that if you go in industry, you can switch around in your comfort level. You can learn from scratch. But the good thing is with your degree, you're able to adapt very well, just based on the fact that you have the basis in engineering. So I'll take you through my journey as in my career, my 20-year career in this field. I break it into two parts. I had an earlier career in Ghana where I did a few things in a few different spaces before I joined the energy sector, right? And one thing, as I was talking about, being able to move from one discipline to the other, I like this quote from Edward Deming. I'm a Deming disciple. I'm sure there are a few Deming disciples out here, but he says that it's not enough to do your best. You must know what to do and then do your best, right? So in as much as you may be able to switch from one industry or one discipline to the other, it's very good to be intentional about what you do, right? And I have been intentional in some ways. In my earlier career, I was not intentional about things, which is okay, right? But what goes to speak to your overall experience is what matters, as in what skills you learn as you go along the way. So I started my career in paper and corrugation. I started with a company called Polycraft. We did corrugated cardboards and cartons. And each one of my career path got me learning a certain special skill that I did not have to begin with. So as a young chemical engineer, I was into processes, right? And I joined this group as some type of production engineer, but I had people that I supervised. And it was an eye-opener to learn people management and also to learn a few quality principles because we had to make sure that the cartons were strong enough to take up the load of packaging that it was going to go be used for. Also learned a lot about waste reduction. I moved on, did something in the water sector, drinking water. Wasn't there for long, but I did learn a few things along the way. One of our goals as engineers is problem solving, right? So you go in a sector, you identify a problem and you try and solve it. And in the water sector, we had a lot of pumps that we used for the water, which meant that very high cost of energy. So identify this problem, learned a little bit about power factor, about the electrical world, and how I could help save energy, right? So it ended up being a good project. We had some good savings, and it helped me advancing in my career. I would say that Air Liquide, which was my next move, is where I transition from process engineering to mechanical, or from chemical to mechanical. And it was really for the interesting fact that they had a lot of unit processes that I had learned at school, right? So in chemical engineering, you learn about exchangers, distillation column, absorption, adsorption, cooling, right? We had cooling towers, we had all these liquefaction. We had all these unit processes that were not very huge units, which meant that you could really get into the nitty-gritty of it, right? And help me advance my mechanical background, dismantling some of these equipment, compressors, pumps, cryogenic systems, and it got me into the mechanical space. So that's really where my mechanical background or my mechanical practice kind of started from. So I did get a opportunity from there. You could see from my career journey. The earlier was in Ghana, my home country. I had the opportunity to relocate to the US, and that's when I got into the energy industry. So I did work for a company called Pelican, worked at a few different refineries, Valero, Marathon, did some projects for Williams Midstream, and it prepared me also for refining. So in the earlier one, in the earlier energy industry, I did a lot of the designing, built piping, built vessels. One of my prized projects was building a tank or designing a tank system for Valero. Not building it, but part of the design team that put that together. So it really helped me, picked up a lot of skills there, code requirements, ASME codes, API code requirements, helped me with multidisciplinary engagement. So, in design engineering, you're dealing with people in controls, civil, because all of these come together as the project, right? So it helped with discipline, multidiscipline engagement, and prepared me for my role in refining, where I started as a reliability engineer. So reliability engineering, of course, bases lots of statistics, right? Lots of analysis of data to drive decision making. I happen to have the opportunity to do RAM studies across some of our refineries, and just the fact that you are able to proactively come up with things that could go wrong and try and tackle it ahead of time is something that is interesting. And I know a number of us will find that an interesting sector to work in. So I was in the downstream space for about 11 years, 11 to 12 years, and ventured upstream. Obviously, upstream is a little bit different from downstream. Downstream processes are very complex, but upstream also have their complex processes that I had to go in and kind of learn some of these new processes. But for those who don't know what upstream and downstream is where you have the end product. So the refining puts out the gasoline, the diesels, the jet fuels that we use on a daily basis. And upstream is where the whole process starts, from exploration to drilling, to production and sending to the refineries. So I'll highlight a little bit on what I'm doing currently at Chevron as an asset integrity engineer. One of the overarching role, I wouldn't say one of the overarching role of an asset integrity engineer is to provide some insight or direction for safe operation, right? Because you want to keep all the products in the pipes and in the vessels and in the tanks. You want to make sure that if you are compressing, there is no error or any issue that would have product come out of the compressor or the pipe or any of the other equipment. The other overarching objective is to make sure that we have minimal to no downtime, right? We call it lost profit or lost production opportunity. So we want to make sure that equipment is always available and we have minimal downtime. So that has been what I've been engaged in. A number of us if we have any mechanical engineering students out here, you probably have done something in the space of finite element analysis and probably some levels of fitness for service. That is one of our daily chores that we do. So I do a lot of fitness for service because obviously there are some vessels that when you run or piping that you run would go below some minimum thickness threshold. And your goal is to be able to do further analysis to make sure that it's safe for operation or is fit for service. And we further do what we call the finite element analysis, which is level 3 of fitness for service. So all of these coupled with data analysis, risk control, we do not risk management and cost control. You do not want to just go ahead and keep replacing vessels, right? But also if there's a vessel that needs to be replaced, you don't want to keep it in operation and then you have a failure and then you have environmental issues and you end up hurting people and all of that. That eventually will cost you more, right? So one way or the other, our jobs is it involves cost control also. So I'll just go a little bit into Chevron and the people that work in Chevron, the disciplines that work in Chevron. Chevron has presence globally, right? And there's a wide range of disciplines that work for a common goal, right? Which is providing affordable energy, right? And making lives, improving lives, right? So one thing that I know Informs would have a lot of data scientists and analysts. So that's one field that you can go into. Reliability, integrity engineering is another field that's really where my job role falls under, and also falls under facilities engineering. We have chemical engineers, mechanical, corrosion material engineers, and there's just a few of what the disciplines that work at Chevron. And I would say that the energy industry has served me well. It is a good industry to work in, knowing that you are providing the very basis of what we need for our technological advancement, which is energy, right? So I've had that at the forefront of my mind since I've been in this industry. And if any of us are interested in going into the energy industry, Chevron's website, we have interns, a lot of interns that we get in year by year. And you can go and apply, as well as take a look at our site and see what opportunities might be available in the area that you want to go into. So at this time, I'll stop sharing and wait for questions at the end of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Bediako. So let's move on to Gabriel Ruiz. So Gabriel, are you ready to share?
Yes. Can you enable screen sharing? I think it's...
Yeah, let me just make you a co-host. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so firstly, thank you to all the organizers, especially Alan, for the invitation to speak to you all today. And thank you to all the students that are out there listening and learning from us. And of course, thank you to the other speakers. I'm also learning from your presentations. So yeah, my name is Gabriel. Here's a little bit about my background and experiences. So my current role is as a senior machine learning engineer at Adobe in San Jose, California. I've been here since my graduation for my PhD program in the summer of 2022. Maybe you've heard of machine learning engineer, maybe you haven't. But at least my take on it is that it's a balance somewhere between a data scientist, which might be like a new word for statistician, and software engineer. So there's some coding involved. And often there's a focus on R&D for some like new product that the tech company is trying to come up with, or some new feature, and so forth. So my background, as far as education goes, is a PhD in statistics from University of California in Los Angeles. So I graduated in summer of 2022. And I was lucky to be able to go into the PhD program after my bachelor's in statistics at University of California in Riverside, where I graduated in 2017. And as far as some other experiences, so I haven't been out of school for very long, but I was also able to be the president of the American Statistical Association student chapter at UC Riverside. So I think if there was any one experience that I can pinpoint in my past that sort of made me excited to be in statistics and data science and so forth, is probably being a part of this student chapter of the American Statistical Association. We visited companies, had Q&A panels similar to the one that we're all in now. So just kind of wanted to put it out there that if you're not involved in like your local Informs chapter or student chapter, or you're not going to like Informs conferences or similar for other orgs, I would highly recommend it. I was also an undergraduate research through a MarkU Scholars Program, which is an NIH program. I was a research intern at an NIH office in North Carolina. And then I was also an intern and National GEM Consortium fellow at Draper Laboratory in Cambridge. So this is an ex-MIT lab turned company focused on like aerospace, consulting, and health and biotech. And then as a PhD student, I was also a data science intern for 2 summers at my current company. So as far as my life as a machine learning engineer, my particular focus is in causal inference modeling. So a motivating applied question we have is like who, meaning customers, subscribers to Adobe products, should receive an intervention. So for example, promo pricing on a subscription, or perhaps a tutorial so that they can use some feature of the software that they're using, or some email, right? So as far as like the promotional pricing goes, we have this 2x2 matrix on the right-hand side, where we ask this counterfactual question, right? So who are those that are gonna convert without promotion on the horizontal axis, and on the vertical axis, who are those that are gonna convert with the promotion? So if you give discounts to too many people, especially the people that are gonna convert to the product either way, the sure things on this bottom left quadrant, you're going to lose money as a company, right? So you don't want to give a discount more than is needed. So basically, you have to identify who are these persuadables. And so that's the key part of like causal inference, or like counterfactual inference. Identifying these persuadables is the idea makes sense, right? But it's kind of a little bit difficult because often you have these other cases like lost causes and do not disturb, right? So you have these extra noise in your problem. Other projects that I've been a part of are things like experiment planning. So like a starter solution to how long should an experiment run when we'd like a segmentation-based recommendation model, meaning you're putting customers into segments, and within those segments, you're deciding what recommendation to give. What are some high-value targets for customer acquisition? And then also some sequence modeling for a customer's journey. So let's say you have some events related to like sending emails. You know whether or not the customer clicked the email, whether they opened the web page, and so forth. So how do you make sense of this to answer a question like how many emails is too much, right? And then these days, generative AI, especially large language models, are a bit ubiquitous across the tech industry. So for example, how can we use a large language model in addition to traditional tools to understand survey data to better the journey that customers have at Adobe? And as far as like coding requirements, I've had to put into a package our tailored versions of causal modeling, multi-arm bandits, and adaptive experiment data collection. As far as tools for my life as a machine learning engineer, I would say that in my case, I was required to have strong knowledge of statistics. So everything from like 2-sample t-tests, power calculations for those 2-sample t-tests, confidence versus prediction intervals, general uncertainty quantification, some Bayesian inference, and also some experiment design. And again, in my particular case, strong knowledge of causal inference, as you may have guessed from the previous slide. So if this is a topic that you're interested in, I highly recommend this Causal ML book. So it's a free PDF that you can find online by some very reputed authors. So this first author, Chernozhukov, is a professor at MIT. In other machine learning engineers' case, a good call out is that you can sub this specific domain knowledge for other domain knowledge, right? So for example, computer vision, large language models, optimization, big data management, and so forth. Also, this position requires strong knowledge of traditional ML methods, right? So regularized linear regression, tree-based regression, and so forth. Oftentimes, we're going to adapt these to our use case. As far as programming, I would say that pretty much every machine learning engineer that I've met is working in Python. Especially because in machine learning engineer, often you have to scale up the application of your machine learning method and also share code with others. So I think Python is pretty universal, I would dare to say, within the machine learning engineer position. And so within Python, things like obviously knowing how to work with the pandas library, so for small data handling, NumPy, SciPy, scikit-learn, econ ML for causal inference, and then there's Multirion Bandit library by an investment bank that's out there that we use sometimes. And then these days, how to use the Open AI API. Large data handling. Of course, not all the data we deal with in tech is small. So at least having some sense of SQL logic. So like, what is a join operation? How do you filter? How do you transform your data in an efficient way? And then also knowing that there's Python wrappers for these SQL operations. So you don't need to have experience working with these, but at least have some sense of the SQL-like logic. For example, Pandas has its own instance of like the join operation and the merge operation and so forth. And then I would say the ability to implement some of the methods that I previously mentioned from scratch, or at least partly, right? So these libraries that exist out there aren't going to work for your case generally. So you have to adapt it somehow. And so as part of that, you need to know a little bit about object-oriented programming. So like, how do you code up your own object class? Let's say very similar to what you would use in the scikit-learn package for a machine learning model. So you have this initialization of your object, and then you have like a .fit command, and you have a .predict command, right? So how do you do that for your particular use case? As far as recommendations that I have for the students here for landing an internship or job, I would say if you're a PhD student or an undergrad, do as many internships as feasible. For example, maybe 2+ in PhD. That way you can learn both what you like and don't like. And then if you do an internship, let's say in the summer previous to your graduation, you're in a good position to get a return offer for a full-time employment. And then also realize that it's a numbers game. Apply far and wide to increase your chances. So I've definitely seen friends and colleagues who are much brighter than I, who for some bad luck or maybe some poor filtering process by the HR people are not given a position or not even given an interview for like their top position. So these sort of things happen. It's not really your fault. So that's why I recommend applying far and wide to increase your chances. And then for tech jobs, often there's like mock interviews online. There's a website called LeetCode, for example, that you can do to get practice so that you at least advance from that first round to the final round of the tech interview process. Definitely ask your friends in industry what their experience was like and if they give you any tips. And of course, read some blog posts, right? And again, I mentioned earlier, companies may often hire interns back to full-time roles. So if you're really, really interested in working in industry, try to do an internship in the summer before your graduation, and let them know that you're interested ideally in going back to that company, right? So that's going to be super important. And then if you're a PhD student or like a master's student or some honors undergraduate student, balance your thesis work with what you like. I think that's the most important, right? Don't do anything that you don't like. Like if you don't like computer vision, don't do that. But do something you like, but also balance it with what's currently relevant. And then part of the reason why I said do multiple internships across your lifespan as a student is that you're going to get some feedback from your first internship in terms of like what's relevant and what's not relevant. In my particular case, in my PhD program, I started working on some sort of like old, mostly solved research problems just because they were super interesting to me. But then I learned in my first internship that perhaps these topics weren't super relevant today in industry, and that my time could be better spent on other things that I'm also interested in, but that are more relevant. So things, for example, in this book that I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, apply to internships as early as the end of summer or early fall. A lot of times I get former classmates or like friends of friends that reach out to me and ask me about positions at my company, but they do so a little bit too late, right? Like it's right before summer, perhaps even February or March. And by then, at least from what I've seen in the tech industry, a lot of the roles are filled up already, right? So they may be accepting backup applications, but for the most part, they're filled already. So just note that at least for tech industry, a lot of, or the majority of roles come out at the end of summer, early fall. And then you're gonna be doing interviews probably like early winter and hearing back pretty quickly. And then make sure your LinkedIn network is pretty good. Make sure you have an up-to-date profile and also a portfolio website that you put on your resume and all that good stuff. But yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. And thank you to all the speakers of this session. Very interesting advice, recommendations, and activities. So just to let you know, to let the audience know, so we are organizing this session for you, and we want, this is the second edition, and we want the brand from this session to be an interaction between the audience and the speakers. So I encourage you to ask questions from the most simple question to the most complex question. So please feel free to ask anything, either unmute yourself to ask your question or place it in the chat and I will read it out loud. But we really want this to be like a let's say, one-on-one interaction between you and the expert. So we are now open for questions. So let's give it, yeah. So who would like to ask?
Yeah, I know people usually a little bit shy at the beginning, so I may ask like one general question. So I think we know this year particularly it feels like difficult to get a job in industry. Is that true? Like you guys like kind of freeze the hiring? That's first question. That may be some like not true rumor. Second, like I know all of you give one suggestions to their to people how to find a job. Like when you guys evaluate their applications, like in the resume, what do you guys value, right? This first thing. And then during their like phone interview, what do you guys value to say, oh, this person, I really want the person to join the team. Yeah, that's my questions. If you three of you can answer them, I will be appreciated.
I mean, I don't mind going first then. Just to
Thank you.
So I'll say, as for the freeze, I've certainly heard that from, I've seen it on LinkedIn and other places like that. I'll say that said, at Jump, we still have the interns that we have coming in this summer are still there. And actually one of the students on this call is going to be joining my group full time in June. So, it hasn't completely dried up in that sense. So as for the second part, so I'll say in particular, the DOE and reliability team, as a hiring manager myself, because we are so active in research, that's one of the big things that I really look to see what kind of research that you've done. And that's why typically in our group, it's third and fourth year PhDs who perhaps even have some published research. And in particular, when it comes to the phone interviews then, so oftentimes I try to find a project that will actually match their research interests and their expertise. But I'm really looking for that spark and curiosity. So in a phone interview, if I ask, just describe your research to me, right? You can often tell how excited that they get. And that goes a long way in both how they explain it and kind of their level of interest. It's just like, well, if I just did this and that, whereas those you can tell who are really invested, that goes a long way.
Thank you, Ryan.
I would
if I can pause. So for the hiring freeze in the energy industry, and I can speak to Chevron. I know there is some restructuring going on. It was announced, so it's public, and in this phase, it means that not really much external hiring going on. I just perceive that's what's happening. But prior to this announcement, I didn't know of any freeze going on. We had a number of interns come and go. I mentored a couple of them. And we also have a program called the Horizons program, where we take people fresh out of college and have them go through a 3-year situation where you go to different departments and find out where you think that your interest is. In what you look out for in interviews and resumes. So one thing that I've always done, and most of the energy companies I've worked with would use situational type questions. So we do ask, tell me about a time when you did this project and what. And in this, you're able to really pick out if someone has done something or he's been involved in something. You're able to pick out everything that he says. If he's faking it, right? You see through those type of questions. So one thing I would say is, for stuff like that, you need to prepare, have planned questions or answers of what you've done, not what you've not done, right? And if you're speaking to it with the energy that you did it, it's going to show, and it's going to show your interest in that position. So that'll be my take.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say I'm not a hiring manager like some of the other two people on this call, but from what I've seen, and then also doing some initial interviews myself, I would say that for the past few years we've had interns every summer, but there's been recently like a reallocation of the budget for like what teams get interns or like what projects they work on to like, for better or for worse, AI, large language models, that sort of thing. I would say it's not impossible if this isn't exactly your background to yourself pivot, right, to sort of solve your skills and how they're relevant to this area. I don't have the exact answer for how to do that, but I think it's still possible. I've seen some interns be hired who are not necessarily working on large language models and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Ryan, would you like to add?
I was just going to say, if I can post the link, this goes to Eric's comment as well, that you can sometimes tell if you're in an interview, if they're trying to use what they call the STAR technique. So like situation, task, action, and result. So that's kind of something well worth looking into if you're preparing for an interview. So to that point of having some things prepared, to know that if I get a question, what are some things that I can answer that relate to that?
That's awesome. Thank you. That's very helpful.
So, questions from the audience?
Sure, yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I actually have been working as a data scientist for a few years, and then I decided to, get my master's at Georgia Tech while finishing that up, or while working. So I definitely would say I feel like there's somewhat of a barrier between roles that would be open for people with a master's and a PhD, from what I can tell. The idea of doing a PhD sounds cool to me. On the same note, the idea of losing out on a lot of money after living the lifestyle for however long is also not great. So I guess, would you guys say, at least in my perspective, I'm kicking the can down the road by not going ahead and trying to get a PhD? Are there avenues to prove out my ability to do, research, applied research, while keeping my full-time job? What would be your advice if I wanted to, kind of upgrade, get into a more applied research type of role?
So in the interest of time, I would say, let's go to Ryan so we can have another question from another person.
So I'll just say to that, with your career journey, there's going to be a whole bunch of options that one of the big things, especially when it comes to research, the biggest thing I would say is that sometimes it is just going to require that extra time. Like even for us within JMP, a lot of times those papers, patents, publications requires that extra time outside of our regular day job. All right. And so part of that is because we're passionate about it. We like to do it. But I'd say So it's not that it can't be done. It depends on how much you want to do it and if you enjoy it as part of it.
Right.
Right.
Thanks. So anyone, another question? So, oh yeah, I see somebody. Yeah, if you can target your question to one speaker so we can have a little bit more room for another question if possible.
Okay, so to Dr. Ruiz, since he's working more in my field, how is the transition from a PhD to the industry in terms of the types of software you use, more enterprise software? Because at least from my experience being in a PhD, you work in smaller groups with open source software. Sometimes you don't do the best development practices, or you don't know how to work in big teams, large projects. How is this transition to learning all of that technology and all of those workflows? And is there, does the companies expect you to know how to collaborate in a bigger capacity, or is this something that they are more lenient in and they teach you how to do all of those things?
Yeah,
Thank
that's a good question. I would say that the experience you have is very relevant, very transferable. Like we're still also using a lot of open source packages and that sort of thing. A lot of times we have internal packages that obviously aren't open source, but like the same practices remain, right? Like sharing code, nice code, documented code, and that sort of thing. I would say, yeah, just practice on once you have the time making the code, we call it like more production level, or in your case, maybe more shareable to like a general audience, right? And so a lot of times if you write a paper, a lot of times you have a package, right, to go along with that. So make sure that the package is like user friendly and that sort of thing. And yeah, as far as like the transition from like PhD to industry, I was lucky to do the internships where I was able to see that perhaps in my case, since I'm a statistician, I used a lot of R before. R was kind of acceptable as an intern, but as a full-timer, I was able to see that maybe more Python, right? So I was able to sharpen my skills there. A lot of times in my position, PowerPoint slides with not too many technical details are more than enough. Initially, when I got hired fresh out of the PhD, I would do a lot of LaTeX slides. So yeah, that wasn't overly appreciated at the time. So yeah, just little things here and there.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So the time is up. So we sincerely thank you. We thank all the speakers. We will offer them a complimentary 1-year membership to join the QSR section. So thank you very much to the audience, and we hope to see you here in more events with Inform's quality, reliability, and statistics section. So thank you very much.